My daughter died 5 years ago. That's what my son-in-law told me. That's what I believed when I threw dirt on her casket. Last Tuesday, I found a receipt in Derek's jacket. Pinewood Gardens, Memory Care, Room 147. $9,400 a month. Recurring for 61 months. 61 months. She died 5 years ago. I drove to that address at midnight. Through a cracked window blind, I saw her, skeletal, hollow-eyed, but breathing. My daughter, Cecilia, hidden 40 minutes from my house this entire time. Derek thought he'd buried her, thought I was just a grieving old man who'd believe anything. He had no idea I'd already started making calls, and that by the time he sat at my dinner table on Sunday, the trap would be set. I was going to take back everything he stole. If you've ever been treated like you're too old to notice the lies, subscribe. This channel is for people like us who refuse to let family get erased. The suburbs of Columbus, Ohio aren't the kind of place where dark secrets thrive. Or so I'd always believed. Tree-lined streets, block parties in summer, the comfortable rhythm of ordinary American life. The kind of place where you wave to your neighbors and assume everyone is exactly who they appear to be. My name is Walter Sinclair. I'm 68 years old, a retired civil engineer who spent 35 years building bridges and highways across Ohio, and for 5 years I've been raising my 2 grandchildren in a house haunted by the ghost of my daughter. Cecilia was our miracle. My wife Eleanor and I had tried for years to have children, had nearly given up hope when Eleanor got pregnant at 32. The doctors called it a blessing. We called her our answered prayer. Eleanor passed when Cecilia was 19, breast cancer that moved faster than any of us expected. I raised our girl through her final years of college, watched her graduate nursing school, walked her down the aisle when she married Derek. I thought I knew what grief was after losing Eleanor. I thought I understood the weight of burying someone you love. I had no idea. Cecilia was 34 when she died. An aneurysm, Derek told me, his voice cracking on the phone at 2 a.m. She collapsed in the kitchen. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. There was no warning, no goodbye, just the sudden violence of biology turning against my only child. I remember dropping the phone. I remember the sound it made hitting the hardwood floor. I remember thinking, this isn't real. This can't be real. I just talked to her yesterday about Lily's school project. The funeral was closed casket. Derek insisted. He said the medical procedures had been invasive, that Cecilia wouldn't want us to remember her that way. I was too shattered to argue, too destroyed to do anything but hold Lily, then 7, and Marcus, then 5, while they sobbed for their mother and asked questions I couldn't answer. Why did Mommy have to go to heaven? Will she come back? Did she know we loved her? Derek had seemed devastated. He'd leaned on me those first months, bringing the kids over constantly, accepting meals I could barely prepare through my own fog of grief. When he suggested I help more permanently take the kids on weekends, then weekdays, then essentially full-time while he sorted himself out, I agreed. What else could I do? They were all I had left of her. All I had left of Eleanor, too, if I'm being honest. Lily has her grandmother's eyes. Looking back, I see how calculated it was. Derek didn't want the burden of raising children. He wanted the freedom to start over, to date, to build a new life, all while I did the hard work of explaining death to a 5-year-old and holding a 7-year-old through nightmares. 5 years. 5 years of birthday cakes without their mother, school plays she never saw, scraped knees. I bandaged while answering impossible questions about heaven and whether Mommy could see them from up there. 5 years of watching Derek date again, then get engaged to a woman named Brittany who wore too much perfume and talked about fresh starts and new chapters. 5 years of grieving a daughter who wasn't dead. The receipt changed everything. I found it on a Tuesday, folded inside his jacket pocket when I went to hang his coat after Sunday dinner. He'd been careless, or maybe arrogant enough to think I'd never look. Pinewood Gardens, Memory Care, Room 147. Idowell, 9,400. I stared at that paper for 20 minutes. My hands shook so badly I could barely read the numbers. Then I opened my laptop and searched for the address. 42 minutes from my house. I'd driven past that exit 100 times on my way to visit my brother in Springfield. By Wednesday morning, I was parked outside Pinewood Gardens, Memory Care, watching the building in the pale light of early dawn. It was a nondescript facility on the edge of an industrial district surrounded by chain-link fencing and cracked pavement. Not the kind of place families chose when they wanted the best care for their loved ones. A weathered sign with faded letters. Bars on the lower windows that someone had tried to disguise with decorative trim. Security cameras at every corner, but several looked broken, disconnected, pointing at nothing. The kind of place designed to be forgotten. I walked in at 9 a.m., moving slow, leaning on the cane. I don't really need but keep in my truck for occasions like this. An old man, confused, looking for information. Nobody pays much attention to old men. I'm looking into facilities for my wife, I told the receptionist, a bored young woman scrolling on her phone. She has dementia. Our doctor suggested memory care. She barely glanced at me. You'll want to talk to admissions. Down the hall, second door on the left. Thank you, young lady. I didn't go to admissions. Instead, I wandered the halls, moving slowly with my hand on the wall like I needed support. The main floor was standard common areas, with elderly patients watching television, staff moving between rooms with medication carts, but I noticed the elevator required a key card to access certain floors. The restricted ward. A nurse stopped me near the stairwell. "Sir, can I help you find someone? I think I'm lost." I let my voice quaver. "Which way to the exit?" She pointed, bored, already moving past me to more important tasks. I retreated, but not before memorizing the layout. Room 47 was in the east wing, second floor, behind those locked doors. That night I returned. Dark clothing, work boots, binoculars I'd used for hunting before my knees gave out. I parked in the shadow of a warehouse and walked through knee-high weeds to the back of the property. The window to room 147 faced a small courtyard filled with dead plants and a rusted bench no one ever used. Through the cracked blinds, I could see her clearly now. Cecilia, my daughter, thin to the point of skeletal, her collarbones jutting beneath a faded hospital gown. Hair that had once been chestnut, the same color as Eleanor's before the chemo took it, now wispy and colorless, spread across a flat pillow. Eyes that stared at the ceiling with a blankness that made me want to scream, to break through that window, to gather her in my arms and run. But she was breathing. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Her fingers twitched against the blanket, not randomly, but with purpose, like she was trying to grasp something that wasn't there. 5 years in that bed. 5 years while I planted flowers on an empty grave and talked to a headstone that marked nothing but lies. I sat in my truck until 3 a.m., shaking so violently I couldn't drive. When I finally made it home, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, the receipt smoothed flat before me, and tried to understand how this was possible. Derek had orchestrated a funeral. There had been a death certificate signed by a doctor, an obituary in the Columbus Dispatch, a headstone in Green Lawn Cemetery with her name carved in granite right next to Eleanor's. How does someone fake all of that? How does an entire death get manufactured? And why? My daughter wasn't wealthy. I wasn't wealthy. A retired engineer's pension, a modest house, a savings account that would cover maybe 2 years of nursing home care if I needed it. What could Derek possibly gain from such an elaborate deception? Then I remembered Cecilia's life insurance policy, the one Eleanor had insisted we take out when Cecilia was born, the one I'd continued paying premiums on for 3 decades because it seemed like the responsible thing to do. $750,000 and the house. The house Derek and Cecilia had bought together 8 years ago, but which Cecilia had mostly funded with her inheritance from Eleanor's mother, my mother-in-law, who died when Cecilia was 25 and left everything to her only grandchild. $400,000 in equity, and the trust fund, the educational trust Cecilia had established for Lily and Marcus with money from her teaching career and careful saving. $200,000 managed by Derek as their father. I did the math on the back of an envelope. $135 million minus $9,400 a month times 61 months, $573,400. He was still ahead by nearly $800,000. My hands stopped shaking. The grief burning in my chest hardened into something colder, something sharper, something that felt like the first clear thought I'd had in 5 years. Derek hadn't just hidden my daughter. He'd profited from her disappearance. He'd collected her life insurance, sold her car, drained her savings, and built a new life with her money, all while paying a facility to keep her silent and invisible. The math was obvious. Even with $9,400 a month, he was coming out far, far ahead. I needed help. Real help. The kind that couldn't be bought, intimidated, or silenced. And I knew exactly who to call. Vera Thompson had been Cecilia's college roommate at Ohio State. They'd been inseparable from the first week of freshman year. 2 nursing students navigating impossible schedules, demanding professors, and the particular chaos of learning to save lives while still figuring out their own. I'd met Vera dozens of times over the years. She'd come to our house for Thanksgiving when her own family was too far away. She'd stood as maid of honor at Cecilia's wedding, giving a toast that made everyone cry. She'd flown in for the funeral, hugged me in the church parking lot, and promised to always be there if I needed anything. What Derek didn't know, what I'd only learned through a Christmas card last year, was that Vera had transferred to a facility in Columbus 18 months ago. She'd mentioned it casually, a line about being closer to family now that I'd barely registered at the time. I dug through my desk until I found that card, the return address. A phone number scrawled at the bottom. I called her Thursday morning, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. Vera, this is Walter Sinclair, Cecilia's father. I need to see you. It's urgent. Silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, Mr. Sinclair. Yes, of course. There's a coffee shop on Broad Street near the library. Can you meet me at 7 tonight? Something in her voice made my heart hammer. She knew. She already knew something. I'll be there. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived at 6:45. I took a booth in the back corner, facing the door. Old habits from decades of job sites. Always know your exits. Vera walked in exactly on time. She looked older than I remembered, older than 39 should look. Dark circles under her eyes, a tightness around her mouth, the kind of exhaustion that goes bone deep. She scanned the room before approaching, like she was checking for someone. Mr. Sinclair. She slid into the booth across from me. I didn't know how to. I've wanted to call you for months, but I couldn't. You know she's there. It wasn't a question. Vera's face crumpled. She pressed her hands flat against the table like she needed something solid to hold on to. I found out 6 months ago. I requested a transfer to the restricted ward because I wanted more challenging cases. Complex patients, the kind who need real nursing skill. And there she was, room 147. I walked in to check vitals, and I saw her face, and I thought, she stopped, swallowed hard. I thought I was losing my mind. Why didn't you call me? I tried. She pulled out her phone, showed me her contacts. My number was there, labeled BLO talked in red letters. The day after I found her, I tried to call you from a burner phone I bought at CVS. Couldn't get through. Tried 3 more times. Nothing. Then my supervisor called me into his office. Dr. Vincent Callahan. He runs the restricted ward. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said someone had flagged my purchase of a prepaid phone. Said I'd been asking questions about patient 47. Said if I contacted anyone at all about that patient, I'd lose my nursing license. That I'd signed confidentiality agreements when I was hired that would bury me legally and financially. Did you sign those agreements? He showed me papers with my signature, Mr. Whoa, Sinclair. I don't remember signing anything like them, but they looked real. Legal terms about patient privacy, penalties for disclosure, liability waivers. So you stayed silent. She met my eyes, and I saw the guilt there, raw and agonizing. I have a daughter. She's 8. My ex-husband pays nothing. If I lose my license, if I get sued, we lose everything. I've been putting money aside, trying to build a safety net, but it wasn't enough to risk. It should have been. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I see Cecilia every shift. I check her vitals. I change her IV bags. I make sure she's positioned so she doesn't get bed sores. And every single time I think about what I should do, and then I think about my daughter, and I hate myself. I reached across the table and took her hands. They were cold, trembling. You're here now. You came when I called, because I can't do this anymore. The silence is killing me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. There's something deeply wrong in that place, Mr. Sinclair. Sinclair, something beyond Cecilia. But I've been too scared to dig. I'm not scared anymore, Vera. I buried my daughter 5 years ago. I buried my wife 7 years before that. I've got nothing left to lose except those grandchildren, and I'll be damned if I let Derek raise them on a lie. I squeezed her hands harder. Will you help me? She met my eyes. In them, I saw the girl who'd once stayed up all night helping my daughter study for her nursing boards, who'd cried with joy at Cecilia's wedding, who'd sent flowers every single year on the anniversary of her supposed death. Tell me what you need. Over the next 2 weeks, Vera became my eyes and ears inside Pinewood Gardens. We developed a system. She would take photographs of documents using a camera hidden in her badge lanyard, then transfer them to a secure email account I'd set up under a fake name. We never spoke on the phone. We communicated through notes left at a dead drop, a hollowed-out tree in the park near the coffee shop. It felt like something from a spy novel. 35 years building bridges, and now I was running an intelligence operation against my own son-in-law. But Vera had been right about one thing. These people were dangerous. And if we were going to take them down, we needed to be smarter. The evidence she gathered painted a picture of calculated cruelty. Cecilia's medical chart described her as suffering from persistent vegetative state secondary to anoxic brain injury. According to the official records, she had no meaningful brain activity, no awareness, no ability to communicate or respond to stimuli. But the nursing notes told a different story. Patient tracks movement with eyes, appears responsive to verbal stimuli. Query: higher cognitive function than diagnosis suggests? VT. That note was dated 6 weeks ago. 2 days after Vera wrote it, someone had crossed it out in heavy black marker and replaced it with "no change." Patient non-responsive. VC. Vincent Callahan. He was monitoring everything. The medication logs were even more damning. Cecilia was receiving a cocktail of drugs I had to look up: midazolam for sedation, vecuronium for muscle paralysis, fentanyl for pain management. The combination, Vera explained in a whispered meeting behind the coffee shop, would keep someone conscious but unable to move, speak, or resist. "It's medical torture," Vera said, her face pale. "She's aware, Mr. Doc. Sinclair. I'm almost certain of it. When I talk to her, her eyes follow me. Her heart rate changes when I mention her children. She's in there. They just won't let her out." The visitor record showed Derek came once a month, always on the 15th, always after 9 p.m. when most staff had gone home. He'd stay exactly 30 minutes, never more, never less, and leave. What did he do during those visits? What did he say to my daughter while she lay there, paralyzed and silent? I couldn't let myself think about it too long, or the rage would consume me. The billing statements were the final piece. Pinewood Gardens was charging $9,400 monthly for comprehensive memory care services, itemized with physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, psychiatric evaluations, and specialized nursing care. The actual treatment Cecilia received? According to the notes Vera smuggled out, she got basic nutrition through a feeding tube, minimal hygiene care, and enough medication to keep her invisible. "The real cost is maybe $2,000 a month," Vera said. "Maybe less. Everything else is profit." Where does the extra money go? To Callahan and his network. And probably to people like Derek. She handed me another photograph. "I found this in the administrative files. A list of premium patients in the restricted ward. 12 names. 12 people hidden away by families who'd paid to make them disappear." "My God," I whispered. "It's a system, Mr. Fair. Mr. May. Sinclair. Sinclair. A machine. And your son-in-law is part of it." I knew then that I couldn't handle this alone. I needed professional help, legal help, the kind that knew how to navigate systems designed to protect the powerful. I hired an attorney named Joyce Chen. I found her through a referral from the Ohio Alliance for the Elderly, a nonprofit I'd contacted under the pretense of general questions about guardianship law. Joyce specialized in elder abuse, medical fraud, and conservatorship exploitation. Her office was small, her fees reasonable, and her reputation was ironclad. When I showed her my evidence, the photographs, the medication logs, the billing discrepancies, Vera's notes, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Why, Mr. Sinclair, if what you're showing me is accurate, this isn't just fraud. This is kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy, and depending on what those drugs are doing to your daughter's body." She paused. "It could be attempted murder. Can we get her out?" "Not yet." She held up a hand before I could protest. "If we move too fast, Derek and Callahan will have time to destroy evidence. They could transfer Cecilia to another facility, claim she died of natural causes, make her disappear for real this time. We need irrefutable proof of the conspiracy. We need documentation so solid that no judge can dismiss it." "What kind of proof?" Joyce leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "We need them on tape admitting what they've done. We need financial records showing the money trail. And most importantly, we need an independent medical evaluation proving Cecilia is not in the condition they claim. If we can show she's been conscious this whole time, that changes everything." "How do we get that evaluation?" "We file an emergency petition with the court. But timing is critical. We need enough evidence to convince a judge to order it, but we can't tip off Derek before we're ready to move." "How long? If everything goes perfectly?" "A few weeks, maybe less." "A few weeks?" My daughter had been in that room for 5 years. Now every hour felt like a lifetime. That night I lay awake, planning. Derek was coming for Sunday dinner. He always did, had made a point of it ever since Cecilia died. The devoted widower, maintaining ties with his children's grandfather, performing grief for an audience of one. He'd sit at my table, ate my food, ask about the kids' grades, and pretend to care about their activities. This time, I would be ready. Sunday arrived, with the kind of crisp autumn weather Cecilia had always loved. I cooked pot roast, Eleanor's recipe, the one she'd taught Cecilia, the one I'd learned to make myself after Eleanor passed because it reminded me of both of them. Derek walked in at 5 p.m., exactly, punctual as always. Brittany trailed behind him, drowning in perfume that smelled like synthetic flowers and ambition. "Walter, smells amazing as always." Derek clapped me on the shoulder. "You spoil us. It's no trouble. I like cooking for family." The word felt like glass in my mouth. Family. This man who had stolen my daughter and let me believe she was dead. Lily and Marcus were upstairs doing homework. They'd come down when dinner was ready. That was our routine. It gave me 30 minutes alone with Derek and his fiancée, 30 minutes of conversation I now had to navigate like a minefield. We sat in the living room. Brittany chattered about wedding plans, something about centerpieces and seating arrangements. Derek nodded along, his eyes occasionally drifting to his phone. I watched him, really watched him, for the first time in 5 years. The way he performed concern, the way he touched Brittany possessively, like an accessory, the practiced grief he could summon on command when conversation turned to Cecilia's memory. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? "Walter, you're quiet tonight." Derek's voice pulled me back. "Everything okay?" "Just tired. I found some old photos of Cecilia last week. Got me thinking about her. That must be hard." His face arranged itself into sympathy. "Have you thought about seeing someone? A grief counselor, maybe?" 5 years is a long time to carry that weight alone. The irony was staggering. This man was suggesting I see a therapist for grief he had manufactured. "I manage," I said. "The children help. You're amazing with them, you know." Brittany's voice was sugar sweet. "Derek always says he doesn't know what he'd do without you." I sipped my coffee. "Speaking of managing things, Derek, I found something odd when I was hanging up your jacket last week. His posture changed. Subtle, but I saw it. The slight stiffening of his shoulders. Gay! The way his fingers tightened on his glass. Oh, a receipt. From someplace called Pinewood Gardens? The silence lasted 3 seconds. Maybe 4. An eternity. Then Derek laughed, easy and dismissive. Yo, that. It's nothing. My Aunt Dad's sister. She's in a memory care facility. I help with the bills sometimes. I didn't know you had an aunt in Columbus. Distant relative. We weren't close growing up, but family is family. He set down his glass, met my eyes with that same practiced warmth. Why do you ask? Just curious. It seemed like a lot of money. Memory care isn't cheap. He shrugged. But what else can you do? I let it drop. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the calculation, the assessment. He was wondering how much I knew, what I might be thinking. Good. Let him wonder. The children came downstairs. Dinner was served. Maid. Conversation turned to school projects and soccer practice and the utterly normal concerns of childhood. I watched Derek play the doting father, the affectionate, almost stepfather, the grieving widower who had rebuilt his life with grace. The performance was flawless, but I knew the truth now, and the truth was going to destroy him. As they left, Derek lingered at the door. Brittany was already in the car, checking her phone. Walter, about that receipt. His voice was low, casual. I'd appreciate if you didn't mention it to anyone. Family finances are complicated, and Aunt Edith is a private person. Of course, son. It's none of my business. He smiled, but his eyes were cold. I closed the door behind him, leaned against it, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. He knew I was suspicious now, which meant he'd be watching me more closely, which meant I needed to move faster. Monday morning, Vera called from a payphone. They're changing her medications. Callahan ordered it this morning. Increased sedation, new paralytic. He's never modified her protocol before. Derek had warned them. He suspected something and was making sure Cecilia couldn't wake up enough to communicate with anyone. I called Joyce immediately. We need to move. We need to move. Now, they're drugging her more heavily. I can have emergency paperwork filed by tomorrow. But Mr. Sinclair, if we do this, there's no going back. They'll know exactly who's behind it. I don't care. My daughter has been trapped in that room for 5 years. I'm not waiting another day. The petition was filed Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, a Franklin County judge had issued an order for an independent medical evaluation of Cecilia Hayes to be conducted by a court-appointed neurologist within 48 hours. Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., a team of doctors, 2 sheriff's deputies, and Joyce Chen descended on Pinewood Gardens. Memory care. I was there when they opened the door to room 147. Callahan tried to block them. This patient is under my care. You can't just barge in here without consulting. We have a court order, Joyce said calmly. Step aside or be arrested for obstruction. He stepped aside, but his eyes found mine, and the hatred in them made my blood run cold. My daughter lay in that bed exactly as I'd seen her through the window. Skeletal, gray, eyes half open, staring at nothing. But when I spoke, when I said her name, those eyes shifted, found mine. Ocust, own, Cecilia, my baby girl, looking at me. The evaluating physician was a neurologist named Dr. Lamara Okonkwo. She spent 3 hours conducting tests while Callahan protested, while lawyers shouted, while I sat in the corner and prayed harder than I had since Eleanor's final days. Finally, she came to me. Her expression was carefully professional, but I saw something underneath, something like anger. "Mr. Raid, more Sue A.M. Prue. Sinclair, your daughter is not in a persistent vegetative state. She's not even close." "What do you mean?" "She appears to be experiencing a form of locked-in syndrome. Her cognitive function is largely intact. She can see, hear, and understand everything around her. But the medications she's been given have paralyzed her voluntary muscle function. She cannot move, speak, or communicate." Dr. Okonkwo paused, choosing her next words with care. "With proper treatment, with the removal of these drugs and appropriate rehabilitation, there's a very good chance she could recover significant function." "Mr. By Kane, which D.R.?" "Sinclair, your daughter may have been fully conscious this entire time." "Conscious. Okay. Aware." My daughter had heard Derek's monthly visits, had felt the neglect of her captivity, had understood with perfect clarity that she was trapped while her husband stole her life and her children grew up believing she was dead. For 5 years, she had been screaming inside her own mind, and no one could hear her. I walked to her bedside, took her hand. Her fingers twitched against mine, not a spasm, but a deliberate squeeze. "I'm here, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Dad's here. I found you, and I am never, ever letting you go again." A single tear slid down her cheek. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. The arrests happened that afternoon. Derek was pulled from his law office in handcuffs while his colleagues watched in shock. Brittany was taken from the house, Cecilia's house, still wearing her yoga clothes from a morning Pilates class. Dr. Vincent Callahan was arrested at Pinewood Gardens, along with 3 members of his staff. The restricted ward was emptied. 12 patients, all hidden by families who'd paid to make them disappear. 12 lives stolen, locked behind coded doors, all freed. Cecilia was transferred to the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center, one of the best neurological facilities in the Midwest. The toxicology reports came back within days, confirming what Dr. Okonkwo suspected. She'd been given a carefully calibrated cocktail of drugs designed to suppress muscle function while maintaining just enough brain activity to be considered alive for billing purposes. A pharmacological prison built just for her. The weaning process would take weeks. Her doctors warned me it would be painful, difficult, full of setbacks. The muscle she hadn't used in 5 years would need to be rebuilt. The psychological trauma of her imprisonment would require intensive therapy. There was no guarantee she would ever fully recover. But she would have the chance. That was what mattered. I was there every day. I read to her, talked to her, played music she'd loved in college. I told her about Lily and Marcus, how much they'd grown, how well they were doing in school, how much they looked like her, how much Lily looked like Eleanor. And slowly, painfully, she began to emerge. Her first word came a month after the rescue. I was reading her a poem by Mary Oliver. "The Summer Day," the same poem I'd read at Eleanor's funeral because Cecilia had asked me to when I heard it. "Dad," barely a whisper, rough from disuse, but unmistakable. I sobbed so hard the nurses came running, convinced something terrible had happened. But it wasn't terrible. It was the opposite of terrible. It was my daughter, speaking for the first time in 5 years, calling me by the name I thought I'd never hear from her again. "Mom, Dad." You found me. I found you, sweetheart. I found you. The trial was held 6 months later in Franklin County Court. Derek faced kidnapping, insurance fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder charges. His defense attorney, expensive, aggressive, paid for with money stolen from my daughter, tried to paint him as a devoted husband, overwhelmed by his wife's sudden illness. My client acted out of desperation, the attorney argued. When Mrs. Basson Hayes suffered her aneurysm, the prognosis was devastating. Or Mr. Dobling to Vision. Hayes made difficult decisions in a moment of crisis. He never intended. Objection. Joyce Chin rose from our table. The medical evidence is clear. Cecilia Hayes's original aneurysm was minor. With proper treatment, she would have recovered fully within months. Hayes chose to institutionalize her not because she was incapacitated, but because her incapacitation was profitable. She approached the jury box laying out the financial records one by one. $750,000 in life insurance collected within 60 days of her supposed death. $400,000 in home equity extracted through refinancing. $200,000 in educational trust funds redirected to personal accounts. And against that, $573,400 paid to Pinewood Gardens over 5 years. She let the numbers hang in the air. What? Mr. Bass poor. Hayes didn't hide his wife because he couldn't cope with her illness. He hid her because keeping her alive, but invisible, was more profitable than either caring for her or letting her die. He turned my client's daughter into a business asset. He turned her children into orphans for profit. He turned a minor medical emergency into a 5-year nightmare. The prosecution called Vera to testify. She described finding Cecilia, recognizing her college roommate in the hollow woman in room 47. She described the threats from Callahan, the fear that had kept her silent, the guilt that had finally driven her to help. Ye called Dr. Okonkwo, who explained in devastating clinical detail exactly what the drugs had done to Cecilia's body and what they hadn't done to her mind. Mrs. Hayes was aware, Dr. Okonkwo said flatly. She could feel pain. She could hear conversations. She understood with complete clarity what had been done to her. The psychological trauma of that experience is almost impossible to quantify. Finally, they played the video. Cecilia had recorded it 2 weeks earlier, with help from her speech therapist. Her voice was still halting, her words carefully chosen, but her message was clear. My name is Cecilia Hayes. 5 years ago, my husband told my father I was dead. He collected my life insurance, sold my belongings, and moved on with his life while I lay in a hospital bed 40 minutes from my childhood home. She paused, gathering strength. I could hear everything, every visit, every lie. I heard Derek tell my father how much he missed me. I heard him promise to take care of my children. I heard him planning his wedding to another woman while I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't scream. Her eyes found the camera, and through it, the jury. Derek thought he'd erased me. He thought he could profit from my disappearance and no one would ever know. He forgot one thing. A pause. A breath. He forgot about my father. My dad never stopped being my dad, even when he thought I was gone. And when he found that receipt, when he found the one piece of evidence Derek was careless enough to leave behind, he didn't hesitate. He fought. He investigated. Now, he risked everything. Cecilia's voice strengthened. I am alive today because my father refused to let me stay buried. And I am here, testifying against my husband, because he taught me that the truth matters more than comfort, that fighting for the people you love is never optional. She looked directly at Derek then, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in the gentle daughter I'd raised, cold, righteous fury. You tried to steal my life, Derek. You almost succeeded. But you made one mistake. You underestimated an old man with nothing left to lose. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, every face was grim, guilty on all counts. Derek was sentenced to 25 years without parole. Dr. Callahan received 30. Pinewood Gardens was shut down, its owners bankrupted by a class action lawsuit representing all 12 families affected by the scheme. Vera received immunity in exchange for her testimony. She left nursing, too, traumatized to continue, but found work with a guardianship reform advocacy group, helping other families navigate the systems designed to silence them. Justice was slow, but it was thorough, and it was absolute. 2 years after the trial, I stood at a podium in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with legislators, advocacy groups, journalists, and families who'd experienced guardianship abuse. My name is Walter Sinclair, I began, and 5 years ago I buried my daughter. I told them everything. The funeral, the grief, the receipt, Stewbury, the fight. My daughter survived because a brave nurse recognized her and risked her career to help. She survived because I found one receipt that didn't make sense. She survived because I refused to accept comfortable answers when something felt wrong. I looked at the faces before me. But 12 other people were found in that facility. 12 people hidden by families who'd paid to make them disappear. And those are just the ones we know about. How many more are out there right now, conscious and trapped, waiting for someone to notice they're missing? The legislation we proposed, the Cecilia Sinclair Act, would require independent oversight of long-term care facilities, mandatory welfare checks for patients without regular family contact, whistleblower protections for healthcare workers who report suspected abuse, and criminal penalties for medical professionals who participate in fraudulent guardianship schemes. It passed the House in the spring. The Senate followed that summer. The President signed it into law on what would have been Eleanor's 70th birthday. I like to think she had something to do with that timing. My daughter stood beside me for the signing ceremony, supported by a cane, but standing tall. Lily, now 15, and Marcus, now 13, flanked their mother. 3 generations of Sinclairs watching history being made. "You did this, Dad," Cecilia whispered. "You saved me, and then you made sure it couldn't happen to anyone else." "We did this," I corrected. "All of us. Your mother, too. She's the one who taught me never to give up on the people I love." That evening, we had dinner at my house. Pot roast, Eleanor's recipe. The table was fuller than it had been in years. Cecilia, the children, Vera and her daughter Sophie, Joyce Chen, and me. No one was missing. No one was hidden. No one was silenced. Marcus asked for seconds, and Cecilia laughed, a sound I'd thought I'd never hear again. Lily showed her mother something on her phone, and they bent their heads together, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to overhear. I watched them from my place at the head of the table, this family I'd fought to rebuild. After dinner, we gathered on the porch. The fireflies were out, blinking their ancient signals across my overgrown lawn. Cecilia sat in the swing Eleanor had picked out 30 years ago, Lily on one side and Marcus on the other. "Grandpa?" Marcus's voice drifted through the evening air. "Will you tell us a story?" I smiled. "What kind of story?" "A true one. About how you found Mom." I looked at Cecilia. She nodded, just slightly. "Once upon a time," I began, "there was a man who thought he understood grief. He thought he knew what it meant to lose someone. But then he found a single piece of paper in a jacket pocket, and everything he believed turned out to be a lie." I told them a version of the story, edited for young ears, shaped for hope rather than horror. The brave grandfather who followed a clue, the friend who risked everything to help, the mother trapped in a tower, waiting to be rescued. And in the end, I said, the man learned something important. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. Every day, you choose to love the people who matter to you. You choose to fight for them, even when it's hard. Even when everyone tells you to give up. Even when the whole world says they're gone. I looked at my daughter, alive and healing and surrounded by her children. You never stop choosing. That's what love means. The fireflies danced. The children eventually went inside, their voices fading into the house. Cecilia remained on the swing, and I sat beside her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up, for finding me. I'm your father." I took her hand. "Finding you was never optional." We sat together as the stars emerged, father and daughter who had survived the unthinkable. Derek had thought he could erase my daughter. He'd thought a death certificate could end a life. He'd thought grief would blind me forever. He'd forgotten the most important thing about fathers. We never stopped protecting our children. We never stopped fighting for them. We never stopped choosing them, no matter what. Not even death can silence that. Not even lies. Not even 5 years of empty graves and unanswered prayers. Because love, real love, the kind that builds families and breaks prisons and rewrites laws, that kind of love doesn't end. It endures. It finds a way. It brings you home. Looking back on this true story, I see a man who almost missed the truth because I trusted the wrong person. For 5 years, I believed Derek's grief because it was easier than questioning. I accepted a closed casket because opening it would have meant confronting a reality too terrible to imagine. Don't be like me. Don't wait 5 years. When something feels wrong, a receipt that doesn't fit, a story that doesn't quite hold, a smile that never reaches someone's eyes, trust that feeling. God gives us instincts for a reason. That unease I felt every time Derek talked about Cecilia's peaceful passing, the wrongness I sensed but couldn't name, I ignored it because the truth was too terrifying to consider. That nearly cost me my daughter forever. Here's what these grandpa stories have taught me. Evil counts on good people choosing comfort over curiosity. When I found that receipt, I could have convinced myself it was nothing. Derek's story about a distant aunt was plausible enough if I wanted to believe it. I chose to ask questions instead. I chose to drive 40 minutes at 11 p.m. and look through a cracked window. I chose to see what was right in front of me. And I found my daughter on the other side. This true story isn't unique. Right now, somewhere in America, someone is hidden away by people who were supposed to love them. Someone is conscious and trapped, waiting for a person who cares enough to look closer. Your vigilance could be the difference. These grandpa stories need to be told, heard, and shared because they carry lessons that might save someone's life. If you suspect something is wrong, if a family member has disappeared into a facility and you're being denied access, If the finances don't add up, if something in your gut says this isn't right, don't stay silent. Ask questions. Demand answers. Trust your instincts. That's the heart of all Grandpa's stories worth telling. We fight for those we love. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Together, we fight for truth. If you believe nobody should be disappeared for profit, subscribe and share this story. And if it hit close to home, leave a comment so the next person knows they're not alone.